In today's lecture, we're going to be looking at police behavior, police misconduct, why um, police behave in certain ways, uh, looking at issues surrounding why police misconduct happens, and then the next lecture we'll look at force and coercion specifically. So there's a couple different ways they look at why this happens. One of them comes from the universalistic perspective, basically looking at why police behavior is similar. Um, that has partly been looked at as to the people that come into policing, uh, how they respond once they are in that situation, sort of the socialization that they go through there. Um, the training process, the field training process after the police academy, also what unit they go into, how they assimilate themselves into the police subculture, but also looking at the individual psychological aspects of the people coming into policing and how their backgrounds have affected them, affect their decision-making processes and things like that. And also the way that people respond to organizational factors, the way that people handle changes in policy or resistance to changes in policy, things like that. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into why a particular individual responds in a particular way once they are within police systems, basically police operational systems. Another way that's been examined in terms of determining why and how police, predicting how police are going to act in a situation, is how they handle daily tasks, things that come up often, similar types of offenders, similar types of offenses, similar types of calls for service, things like that. The first is a watchman style, which is in areas where there's not as many formal policies, smaller rural areas, and those officers basically just deal with them as they come. They might base it off of how they've handled in the past, but there are more tailored responses. Also, from a service mentality, where the police officers are seeing themselves providing a service to the community, that they are again doing something sort of government works that has to be done, that needs to be done, and they're the ones that are there doing it. And then we also have legalistic mindset, where the officers are basically trying to enforce the law, whether that's all aspects of the law or it's just in the given situation, more sort of by the book response. And the opposite of sort of the guaranteed by the book response, going to try to enforce the specific word of the law, is discretion. Discretion is basically decision making. It's an official action made by a criminal justice official, and it's just what they want to do in a situation. Police typically have fairly wide discretion in any given circumstance of what they want to do, how they want to handle it. Do they want to arrest someone? Do they not want to arrest someone? Some of the factors that influence that are organizational factors. There might be a formal policy about a particular type of offense. It could be a neighborhood situation, sort of neighborhood policing, where the police know what types of minor criminality the neighborhood is worried about, what types of things that they aren't. It could be situational factors based on the individual and the crimes they've committed. Number one being the seriousness of the offense. Also, what type of policing are we doing? Are we going out looking for things to try to control crime, or are we taking a more reactive stance? The attitude of the offender, the attitude of the potential victim or complainant is also very important. You also have the race, gender, and age of the individuals involved. Again, not really supposed to be necessarily a factor, but typically it is, because of the just the nature of American society and how the importance that we have placed on these demographic characteristics, even though they're really not. We typically might see older victims or complainants as more vulnerable. Some police officers would view women as more vulnerable over men, um, and there's various issues with race and what the police officers bring to the table themselves. But they are factors that go into the decision making process. In many cases, unfortunately, is there a pre-existing relationship between the offender and the complainant? Also, what is the mental state of those individuals involved? Are there any other environmental contextual issues? Time of day? Is it during a celebration? Is it during a riot? There's a lot of different things that can come up that can play into the decision of whether or not to. Basically, we're talking about whether or not to arrest someone in this criminal justice scenario. Also, the presence of others, other officers, other bystanders that can play into it as well. The officer factors as well. The education of the officer. It's been shown that officers that take college courses in criminal justice use lower levels of force and use force less frequently. Age of the officer, again, that can sort of play into that as well, along with experience. How long have they been on the force? What type of a decision-making toolbox, type of de-escalation toolbox do they have? You also have the race of the officer, the gender of the officer. Again, those things should be less important, but sometimes they can be fairly important, again, depending on how they interact with all the other factors that we're talking about in this certain situation. And there's also human factors, because officers are human. So their mood in a particular situation can affect their decision-making process. And we're talking about discretion. There's a wide berth of options that they can choose and what they can and can't do in a situation. So that having a wide berth of options, again, when it's not dictated by the seriousness of the offense. Again, the seriousness of the offense is going to be the most important part, whether it's officer factors or factors coming from the situation, the environment, the victim, the complainant, or the offender. The seriousness of this is going to dictate a lot of this. But in a situation where it's not a serious offense and the officer does have a wide berth of discretion, when you mix that with the wide spectrum of influence that can come from just the mood that the officer has that day, again, these are humans making decisions. There's a lot of opportunity for different types of outcomes. Some types of misconduct that take place, and we'll talk specifically in the next lecture about the difference between, for instance, say police brutality and police excessive force. But like in this context, deviance, misconduct are basically talking about the same thing, talking about illegal actions that are taking on the job, or they could be off-duty issues because of the connection that the police have to the community. They're sort of always on duty. So when we have these, so profit-motivated crimes is pretty self-explanatory. A lot of things from money, stealing, working with criminal organizations, things like that. Off-duty public order crimes is one of the main things I want to talk about, because that has a wide impact on police and a particular department, police in an area. For instance, when a police officer gets arrested for like a DUI, something like that, it looks very bad on the police force that they work for, and it also has a negative impact on people's perception of police in that area in general. Those are off-duty public order crimes. You also have off-duty crimes against persons, which get more serious. Again, because officers are trained in various types of combat, also trained in weapons training. Crimes against persons can be very serious, involving police officers. Also, a lot of drug-related offenses, whether that's using or some sort of profit-motivated crime associated with drugs. Could be abuse on duty. Again, we'll talk about the difference between excessive force and police brutality in the next chapter. Obstruction of justice, not collecting evidence, intimidating witnesses. There's a lot of things that police officers can do that can affect the procedural justice process throughout the courts, within the court system, and even into the correctional system. Last one here is fail to perform a task. So failing to arrest someone. In the past, a lot of police officers had the opinion that prostitutes couldn't be victims of sexual assault. So if that was reported, misconduct would be not filing the report, not making the report, not looking into it, following up on it, things like that. So failing to perform tasks that they are supposed to be doing. As far as how frequently people are corrupt, police officers are corrupt, typically we're looking at less than 5% in a department. 10% is a lot. 10% would be a very corrupt police department. And the two main types that were sort of teased out in a study that was done about the New York City Police Department were grass eaters and meat eaters. Grass eaters are people doing the small things, taking drugs or money from corner drug dealers, things like that. Meat eaters would be things like organized robbery, organized murder, very serious offenses. And if you think about which is more problematic, you might think that the more serious offenses are more problematic, but in truth, the grass eaters are the real problem. Because if the grass eaters aren't doing their thing, aren't committing their minor, lower level corruption, then it never occurs to anyone to be able to do the meat eater corruption. So if we can't get away with taking $100 off of a corner drug dealer, there's going to be less of a chance of thinking that we can get away with an organized murder or organized robbery. So the grass eaters sort of set the stage for the meat eaters. And that's why they use those sort of dinosaur terms. The meat eaters have to have the grass eaters there to prey upon. So why is all this still happening? We've known about grass eaters and meat eaters since early 1970s, the Knapp Commission. We've done a lot of studies about the sociological, psychological, organizational factors that play in. So why is this still a problem? And it comes down to two major factors, the nature of police work and police subculture. The nature of police work is such that there's limited oversight. They have interactions with basically commodity goods, so drugs, cash, things like that. They come in contact with those materials and items more frequently than other jobs, and it creates a almost constant threat of potential corruption. And also the interactions with suitable victims. So they're going to encounter drug dealers. They're going to encounter people that have illegal cash, that people that are criminals themselves that don't want to or can't, for whatever reasons, report crimes against them to the police. They interact with those individuals. They see them. They encounter them frequently. So much like with the goods, the money, the drugs, things like that, the opportunity is there, it's ever present. There's also the issues of the blue wall. And the two major issues there, in police subculture, are the blue wall of silence, where officers are reluctant to testify against other officers regardless of the reason why. They just won't do it, blanket. And then also the organizational protections that are in place with police unions. We talked about the duties of police unions in the past, but police unions and other structural aspects that are in place that make it very hard to fire bad officers. So when you combine the ever-present opportunity with the difficulties in prosecuting the misconduct, it creates a situation where people that are motivated to commit these offenses have the opportunity to do so. Okay, so that's just sort of a brief overview of police misconduct. We're going to look specifically in the next chapter at force and coercion.